On today's show, a clash of styles as Tyrese Haliburton and the high-octane Pacers are set to take on Jalen Brunson and the slow, grinded-out, defensive-minded Knicks. Things to watch for in this series, key matchups, and so much more on today's Locked On NBA.
You are Locked On NBA, your daily NBA podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up and welcome to another edition of Locked On NBA, the biggest stories with the local experts. I'm your host, Jackson Gatlin, also host of Locked On Rockets right here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Now, today's episode is brought to you by DoorDash. Moms are a gift, right? So give her the best this Mother's Day. Get gifts that are as thoughtful as she is with DoorDash. Select from hundreds of expertly crafted bouquets to the best of tech to different self-care essentials and so much more delivered right to her doorstep. Look, you might have some really big plans to take her out for a nice Mother's Day lunch or a fancy dinner, and that's incredible, right? But what better way to surprise mom than to have a gift waiting for her on her doorstep the moment she wakes up on her special day? Or it could be a special day for a number of moms in your life, right? Use DoorDash to make sure that they all know that you're thinking about them. Get all your Mother's Day gifts all in one place. Get 50% off of your next order, up to $15 when you spend $15 or more on your next flour, convenience, grocery, or retail order. Now with promo code LOCKEDONNBA using DoorDash. Again, that's LOCKEDONNBA. Order using DoorDash today. Terms apply. Joining us now is the host of Locked On Knicks, Alex Wolfe. You can track down wherever you listen to your podcasts and on YouTube. Just search Locked On Knicks. Here to preview Knicks Pacers, get into it a little bit. Two teams with some very distinct stylistic differences here, Alex. You got the Knicks, who I'm pretty sure Tom Thibodeau would be like ecstatic if these games ended with a final box score of like 75-70 on a nightly basis. Meanwhile, you've got the Pacers, who were the second fastest team in the NBA this season with pace, high octane, very potent offense. So it's going to be a kind of a clash of two very different teams stylistically here in the second round. I want to start there with the pace numbers, right? Because no pun intended with the Pacers. Obviously, it's always so weird to talk about pace and Pacers, but Pacers were the second fastest team in the NBA this season. That pace has slowed down a little bit here in the playoffs, but the Knicks were bottom of the league in pace. So I'm curious your thoughts on how the tempo battle is going to affect this series from the jump.
I mean, I think they're going to have to, from the Knicks perspective, if you want to control that pace, keep doing what you do on the offensive glass. That way you can extend your own possessions and, keep the ball on your side of the court longer. Also limits transition that way. So, if you're getting offensive rebounds and ultimately finishing plays that way, then that's one less possession for the Pacers to go sprinting down the floor and, go for a transition dunk or whatever. But I do think the Knicks will have to make a little more of a commitment to playing transition defense. And, at times during the regular season, it was sort of I don't want to say a huge issue for them, but enough of an issue that like sometimes you would get done with the game and be like, man, the transition D was really what kind of killed them in this game. And, one of those games was against the Pacers, where the Pacers scored like, I forget what the final total was, but they scored like a butt ton of points against the Knicks in one of their regular season matchups. So I think there's going to have to be a commitment to like getting back on defense, making sure to be ready for that. Like if you don't get your offensive rebound, to be ready to sprint back and, get in a formation quickly, get three guys back to fight that, that transition and see where the cards lie. And then, bring your final two defenders back or whatever. But, it's going to be an interesting chess match. Like I'm really curious to see how the Knicks look to challenge the Pacers, but also if the Pacers are up for the challenge of playing a more half court style offense when it comes down to it against the Knicks, because that's what the Knicks are going to try over and over again to force them into. And if the Knicks do well enough defending that and defending the pick and roll and, playing good coverage there and, making taking Haliburton out as a scorer. And, I would love to highlight how I feel about Siakam in a certain matchup in a second, but like, if you could do some things to mitigate their half court offense, and maybe the transition doesn't even really matter that much if you just win it that much in the half court. So it's going to be very interesting to see that. Like, I think the first game will be pretty telling for how things are going to go for the rest of the series.
You're going to get a second to talk about Siakam and OG. Don't you worry. Look,
there you go.
So I'm curious. That is a big part of it, right? Is the Knicks are a dominant rebounding team, top 5 this season. Pacers, not a great rebounding team, bottom 3 this season in rebounding. So I'm curious, like, just trying to think of how the Knicks kind of balance that, right, by, being aggressive, attacking the offensive glass, staying true to their identity, but also not giving up those easy transition points, right? Because if you have that moment where you try and, you send, 2 or 3 guys to try and attack the offensive glass, if you don't come away with that second chance opportunity, then suddenly this high octane Pacers team is out and running in transition for some easy opportunities.
Yeah, I almost wonder, when you put it that way, where you mentioned, that the Pacers are not a high rebounding team, I almost wonder if there's going to be a little bit of a style shift in how the Knicks approach rebounding. If they kind of just start saying Isaiah Hartenstein and Mitchell Robinson might be enough just by themselves to get those offensive rebounds, or maybe, let Josh Hart kind of eye the situation and say, hey, like on this possession, I see where that ball's going. I think that I can get the offensive board. I'm going to go for it. But like against the Sixers, it was a very similarly sized team with very similar goals. Like they were very motivated to get those offensive boards as well. And also were good on the defensive glass. And I think the Knicks were just kind of like blitzing everything because they knew that the Sixers would want to slow it down on the other end too. So, it wasn't a huge deal to try to like prevent transition with them. I wonder if in this series, if they're going to kind of say, okay, like Mitch or Hartenstein, you're going to stay down there. You're going to go for the board. Josh Hart, crash as necessary. But like OG, we want you booking it back in transition. Like Deuce McBride, if you're out there, we want you getting to half court and getting ready to meet, Haliburton, whoever around half court. Like Brunson, we want you back there. He's kind of playing free safety, trying to tip passes, which Brunson is actually quite good at. It's like his one big like defensive thing that he does well as sort of an undersized player. So yeah, I wonder if that's going to be part of the strategy to kind of keep their identity while also not surrendering any of the things that the Pacers want them to surrender.
Looking at some of the matchups just up and down the lineups in the series, obviously you got the star point guard battle between Jalen Brunson and Tyrese Haliburton. That's going to be some electric performances there. I know we're in store for a ton of highlight reel worthy plays between those two guys together, but I know you wanted to shine a light on the Siakam OG matchup. That's going to be a ton of fun. Obviously 2 former teammates won a championship together, and so give me your thoughts really quick on how OG is going to be trying to slow down Pascal Siakam in this series.
Yeah, so it's going to be interesting, right? Former teammates that were on the Raptors, they actually have not faced off in other uniforms yet. So we don't have anything to give us an indication of that. But I was writing something for my site, The Strickland, today, just as part of like a roundtable discussion. I highlighted the same matchup, and I had this thought of like, I wonder how OG did as a member of the Raptors against Julius Randle, since Randle's been on the Knicks, because I find stylistically that Randle and Siakam are actually pretty similar players. Like they're 4 men that are of similar stature. They have similar motivations on offense. Both of them go to the midi sometimes. Both of them are respectable 3-point shooters, good at finishing inside, good at handling the ball for their size, all this stuff. And so I was like, oh, I wonder how OG did against Randle. Now you could take this data for what it's worth. I know it's sometimes kind of flawed from NBA.com with their like player to player defensive tracking, is like as far as like the stats of like, oh, this guy shoots X percentage or whatever when he's guarded by this specific player. It could be a little dicey. But looking at the data since 2019 to 20, so since Randle started with the Knicks, he has shot, I think the number, don't quote me on this because I didn't write it down before this, but I think he has shot 17 of 47 against OG Anunoby as his primary defender, which is like a robust like 30 something percent, like 34%, something like that. So if that's any indication, then I kind of like this matchup. Like I think that OG in the Sixers series didn't really have a great matchup to like the Knicks have one of, if not the best wing defender in the NBA on their team in OG Anunoby. I don't think that's too debatable. But there wasn't really a perfect wing on the Sixers for him to guard. It was like Tobias Harris, who may as well already be in Detroit, and Kelly Oubre, who's very, he's very hot and cold, not necessarily the most impactful offensive player that you really had to game plan for. So they tried sticking on Maxey, which just was not a good matchup for him. Like Maxey's just too quick. Like you need a quicker guard, which is why Deuce McBride did a little better. DiVincenzo did a little better at times on him. And then they did some stuff that I think the last time I spoke with you was right after they put him on Joel Embiid for like the better part of a second half. And it sort of worked in like a ball denial sense or whatever, but that still wasn't an ideal matchup to deal with Embiid. I think Siakam is finally like the matchup that you want to turn OG Anunoby loose on in the playoffs. So I think like for as much impact as he obviously had in that crucial game 6 against the Sixers and everything else, I don't know that we've seen the ideal version of OG Anunoby in the playoffs yet. And I think that this matchup might be the one where it's like this is going to be his contract earning matchup for this coming summer, where he's if he really knocks this one out of the park, like it's going to look pretty good for him as he's seeking a new contract going into the summer.
I like that. His contract earning matchup. I'm going to have to coin that phrase. You're going to have to coin that phrase and then make sure everybody else gives you due credit for using it. Last thing I got here for you, Alex, give me your series prediction. What you feeling?
The homer in me wants to say Knicks in 5. I think it's going to be Knicks in 6 or 7. I do think the Knicks end up winning. I think that the home court advantage will work really well for them. I also would not be surprised. I have to double check the schedule, but I think that one of the games is on a Saturday. I would not be surprised if half the stadium is Knicks fans in Indianapolis, just like in Philly. It seems like Knicks fans are very down to travel and very down to like take over opposing arenas this year. Not just in the postseason, but like during the regular season, this is a big theme too. It seems like people are very much vibing with this team and willing to spend the same amount of money to go to the road arena that they would just to get in the door at Madison Square Garden, including, flight and everything else to get out to the road arena. So yeah, I think I'm going to say Knicks in 6, but I would not be surprised if it went to 7, but I do think the Knicks end up winning the series.
I'm ultimately leaning Knicks in 6 as well. But how is the star point guard battle going to turn out between Jalen Brunson and Tyrese Haliburton? What about that matchup with Pascal Siakam and OG Anunoby? Will Knicks fans travel to Indiana? You're going to have us covered for all of that and so much more over at Locked On Knicks. Alex, thanks for stopping by Locked On NBA with me.
Thanks so much for having me. It's been a great deep run on Locked On NBA for the Knicks this year. I'm loving every bit of it.